Chapter 4. I realized I was still clinging to Alejandro's shirt. I made my fingers release the fabric and kept my eyes glued to the tiled floor. Retreat was the best option, but before I could slip into Mrs. Bach's classroom to escape, Alejandro's golden instinct thread reached out and wrapped around my wrist, preventing me from going anywhere. Neither Alejandro nor the descendant could see emotion like a demon can, so neither of them reacted to the chain around my wrist. No, I want her here with me. The interpreter said the words as Alejandro signed them, but a change had come over her. Her eyes had glazed over, and her face had gone slack. A trick of the descendants when they interacted with ordinaries they didn't want to remember them. The interpreter would have no recollection of this conversation. I tried to pull my hand free of the golden strand of emotion, but it was difficult to do without drawing attention to myself, and the last thing I wanted was to steal the descendants' attention away from Alejandro. You've notified us that you're ready to move on to the testing phase. Is that correct? Testing? I looked between the descendant and Alejandro, and I realized what I was witnessing. Cadophilius wasn't the only one gathering recruits for the final days. Alejandro was being recruited to be a guardian. The descendants of angels were preparing for the end of time, and they had chosen Alejandro to join their legions. Apparently, they had tests. The demon horde wasn't so picky. If you had a demon essence and a first name, you were required to join when called, a call I had ignored. I'd like to see what I can do. Alejandro moved his hands with firm, decisive movements. I want to make a difference. I didn't know what would happen if the descendant noticed that I had possessed Jackie, but from the slack expression on the interpreter's face, my lack of facial movement would only make the descendant think I was an ordinary, and that I would forget this interaction as soon as it was over. I risked a glance at Alejandro. His eyes were alight with determination, a desire I felt reflected in my hungry soul. I felt pulled toward his energy like a stream of water is pulled toward a balloon full of static. The golden strand slipped off my wrist like it sensed my decision to stay put. There will be 3 tests. The descendant spoke like a presenter reading off a slide presentation, and I thought I lacked emotion. Our 3 priorities are to protect, serve, and uplift. You will be tested on each of these qualities. If you pass, you will be invited to join us at the Veil and trained to become a guardian. What happens if I fail? Alejandro asked. The interpreter made the words monotone, with no inflection, no concern or interest drawn in her features. I could see the tension in Alejandro as his emotions swirled around him. If you survive, but fail to reach our standard of acceptance, you will not be able to return to your normal life. Your memories will be erased, and you'll be given a new identity. You will not remember any of this. What were the odds? I had less than 24 hours left in this ordinary's body, and my one chance to speak with the boy who appreciated poetry and expressed emotions was being interrupted by my declared enemy. Descendants and their guardians scattered demon essences to try and bring peace to the world, while we eked out an existence sucking on sorrow. As if that wasn't bad enough, now they were willing to risk this boy's life and memory to find more warriors for the end of time. When do I start? Alejandro formed the question, and the interpreter repeated it. The descendant disappeared before the reply echoed through the air. Now. The classroom doors slammed shut. The lights shifted from a bright yellow to a dull red. A thick fog rose from the floor, and a flashing white light from the emergency fire system pulsed through the halls. The interpreter was gone. I stepped in front of Alejandro to sign the words where he could see me. Don't do this. He looked at me, examining my motionless face, holding my gaze captive the way the string of emotion had held my wrist. If he was looking for something in my expression that would convince him to listen to me, he didn't find it. The hallway was deserted except for me and Alejandro. I waved my hand through the fog, studying the movement that my physical form could create, while my mind reviewed what had just happened. The descendant had pulled Alejandro and I into a paused, alternate state to take some kind of test. The descendant's first priority was to protect, so, even though the descendant had seemed annoyed at my presence, he needed me, needed someone for Alejandro to protect. They'd brought me along, thinking I was an ordinary, to see if Alejandro would succeed in protecting me. Protecting me from what? Not that I needed protecting. When a demon possessed an ordinary, they had otherworldly power, speed, and endurance. There wasn't a fight I couldn't win. The question was, did I fight? Or did I sabotage a potential enemy soldier? If he failed, he would be taken away and I wouldn't get my conversation. If he won, he would join the Veil, but at least I would have more time. The longer the tests lasted, the more time I would have with him. I wouldn't let him fail, not until the very last moment. Out of the fog came a large shadow of a beast, a creature that was as familiar to me as my own essence, the creature that demons become when they are starved of sorrow too long. A Fenris. "Stay back," Alejandro signed. "Did they give you any weapons?" I asked. A descendant could scatter the essence of a Fenris for a short time with a weapon lined with green hematite, but even a descendant couldn't hold off a Fenris with their bare hands. Alejandro stepped between me and the beast. He was right about body movements being its own aspect of the language. He didn't have to sign a word to tell me he was willing to protect me from danger. He didn't even know me. He was brave, but this wasn't right. There was more to the test. I pulled on Alejandro's shoulder and turned him toward me. "Look around. They must have left you a way to fight. They want to know if you can see more than just the enemy." I don't know if I'd read those words in a poem or somewhere back in my demon training, but the words rang true in my essence. The message had its intended effect. Alejandro went on the defensive and studied his surroundings. When the beast lunged, Alejandro dodged to the right, pulling me to the floor, so the Fenris flew over our heads, missing its target and sliding down the hall on its poison-tipped claws. "There," I pointed, but Alejandro was already moving. He'd seen it first. One of the lockers had a green light coming out of the vent. Alejandro punched the locker to bend it out of place. He grabbed the top corner and jerked outward. His strength was impressive, but there had to be more, a reason the descendants were looking to recruit him. The locker resisted a moment too long. The beast recovered its footing and launched itself at Alejandro before he could pull out the weapon. I tackled the beast, wrapping my arms around its neck and twisting so that the Fenris's feet slipped out from under it. We slid into the wall, crashing against a door. With my arms wrapped around the neck of one of my siblings, I understood its hunger like it was my own, a feral, consuming emptiness that cried out to be fed. I ran my hand down the slimy back of the Fenris, whispered calming lines into its ear from the poem "The Fish" by Elizabeth Bishop. I spoke of victory and rainbows. Metal squealed as Alejandro succeeded in ripping the locker door open and pulling the weapon free. I didn't see what weapon he held, but I felt my sibling fighting to break loose of my grip, legs flailing, jaw snapping. I repeated the last line of the poem, and I let the fish go. I released the Fenris. It clawed its way to its feet, turning on me, teeth bared, leaning forward, nose to nose. There was a flash of green as Alejandro brought his weapon down. The Fenris let out a shrill whine of pain, of relief, and then disintegrated into ashes.